Guys, as you know, I like to cover the topic of censorship, digital media censorship on the podcast. And I have a terrific guest, Kris Ruby, who's going to help us dive deeper into the actual mechanics, the mechanisms that drive this kind of censorship. Kris Ruby is the CEO of Ruby Media Group. She's an expert on artificial intelligence, so-called machine learning, as well as social media. And you can follow her on Twitter. This is kind of funny, at Sparkling Ruby. Her website is just Kris Ruby, Kris Ruby, RUBY.com. Kris, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you. I think I came across this fascinating thread that kind of got me onto the work you were doing. It was initially merely a conversation that you were having, a back and forth with a whistleblower at Twitter. Talk a little bit about how you found the whistleblower and also what was the upshot of that conversation.
Sure. So thanks so much for having me on the show. You're correct in that it did start out with just a conversation about some things that were going on at Twitter. And I really wanted to understand what guano meant in Bari Weiss's reporting when I saw that on the back end in that screenshot. And from there, I had 1,000 other questions once I understood that had to do with machine learning. So really that screenshot, I had more questions than we were really given answers. And that's what started my research and reporting here. And from there, I discovered and received many files pertaining to how Twitter used artificial intelligence and natural language processing and machine learning to essentially moderate content deemed to be political misinformation.
All right, so let's talk about that because in the Twitter files, most of it has focused on the kind of internal communications at Twitter. Joel Roth says this to another guy. And so these are human communications that have been extensively documented by a series of journalists, obviously at the behest of Elon Musk. You could almost call it the Ruby files, in which you're talking about the fact that these social media companies, they don't just operate by human beings looking at something and go, oh, wow, that's misinformation. They use algorithms. They use machine learning. So let's understand some of these terms. What is an algorithm?
Well, so what's interesting here is it's not so much the algorithms that I have as much as the list of n-grams. So n-grams are used, I would say, in an algorithm as a series of keywords. One of the n-grams that I noticed was something called 2,000 mules, which of course, which is how we got to where we are right now. That's a perfect example of political algorithmic bias, where Twitter deemed 2,000 mules to be associated with political misinformation. That was what I was told. And therefore, if you were tweeting, if you were using the phrase political misinformation and election fraud and voter fraud and Dropbox, all of those terms together in context, that would be flagged. And it would be flagged by either a human for review or an algorithm. But I think you really hit it right on the mark, which is that the majority of this content moderation is not being done by humans. No one is belaboring over what you're saying, right? If you're not you, or if you're not Charlie Kirk, or if you're not, someone at a very high level, no one really cares. And that's just the truth. The machine learning will take you out. That's the big smoking gun story here that I really think people don't get. And that I think, unfortunately, the Twitter files somewhat misleads people to think that Joel Roth is sitting there talking about their account, where it's just not happening. All of this is on autopilot in the background. And when people really understand that and they see that story, they're going to be very, very angry, because the truth is in the data. The data doesn't lie, as you know as well from the work that you've done. That's what I'm fighting for here. I'm fighting for truth and transparency in those machine learning documents. I have the data of what was deemed political misinformation with the n-gram list. But that data has a connected underlying vocabulary to it. By that, I mean, when you say 2,000 mules, this is what it means. And this is why you mark it. Those content moderators work off of those documents. We need those documents released to the public so that the public can understand how the data I have connects to those training manuals that they have at Twitter.
Now, you've had an interesting exchange with Elon Musk in which you talked about this, and he responded and I think said something to the effect of, this is interesting. And you even asked him, hey, is it okay if I release the data that I have? And I think that he said, yeah, if you camouflage some identities, you can do that. Are you saying that you think that these machine learning algorithms are still operating at Twitter despite the release of the Twitter files?
Yes, I am. I have no evidence that they're not, because people are still getting suspended and removed from the platform for using the very same words. But I think there's evidence of something else here. I think when someone really understands how machine learning or natural language processing works, and also what it means to be in compliant with current laws around speech, there's no way you can truly have free speech on any social media platform with the state of AI being used in content moderation. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not saying that someone's misleading, but I do think that we need a greater level of transparency and trust. For ML to work, something has to be positive and something has to be negative. What is Elon Musk choosing to be positive or to be negative? We know that with machine learning or things like ChatGPT, it works with reinforcement learning. What behavior is being reinforced? We don't have answers for any of that when it comes to the future of machine learning at Twitter. That's very important information for anyone to know or to even question when we're talking about these terms. And I will say this. I think that really where we're headed is very scary with a lot of these quote unquote responsible AI programs at some of the top tech companies in the world. In my opinion, they are extremely irresponsible. They are often staffed or they work directly with academic researchers who are funded essentially by the government. And when I asked who created these word lists, where did the word list come from? They said, well, we work directly with the CDC and the government and third-party agencies who told us what word list to monitor because they're the experts. So here we have a situation where data scientists are really actually doing what they're told to do. They're not necessarily speaking out because they're doing their job. They can't not do what they're told to do without risk of getting fired. So I'm not even sure it's their fault. This is so deep of how this is going on. And no one's really questioning what machine learning fairness even means or what responsible AI means, because we have a bunch of irresponsible people running it.
Let's take a pause. When we come back, Kris, let's dive a little bit more into the significance of this and what conservatives can do to fight back against it.